guys. Welcome to another week of Evolve. I am your host, Monette Brann-Natta. And this week, we are going to get into something that's been talked about a lot. I've got a lot of feedback about this. You guys have heard me talking about communication. You've heard me talking about signs and songs and numbers and angels. And I've had a lot of you, thankfully, giving me great feedback. What does that mean? Now, I've kind of grazed over it lightly and gotten to a few explanations. What I'm trying to do in these first shows is lay down a foundation so that we can establish a dialogue, which we seem to be really happy about that. But that we can establish a dialogue where you understand what these things mean. And that means for a while it feels a little bit elementary, and I get that. And I understand for some of you guys that are at a different place, it can be a little frustrating. So I ask that you be patient with all of us as we're evolving together. One of the basic principles of communication in the metaphysical world is numerology. It's the universal language. I once had an algebra teacher, Mr. Turpos, who told me that numbers were the universal language. He was a really funny guy, short in stature, huge in personality, and he really conveyed this idea that our world could be unlocked with numbers. Now, me, not being a fan of the math, I was more the English gal. I was like, really, Mr. Turpos, numbers are going to unlock my world? Little did I know how right Mr. Turpos was. Not in the way that he might have imagined or was hoping when I was sitting at the back of the class, hoping he wouldn't call on me, but in a different way. Numbers have unlocked my world, and they unlock the world for many. A lot of you every day are passing by these numbers and you're seeing sequential numbers and you're thinking, that's a nice coincidence, but it is the basic tenet of angel communication or universal communication. When we're first born, and actually while we're still in utero, we are learning to communicate. Now, I'm just talking about with our outside environment, our mother, our parents and family around our mother. We're hearing these mumblings and rumblings. And when we're not happy in utero, we communicate with our mother. We stretch out or we kick or we roll over or we go to sleep or we have the hiccups. And she knows, hey, maybe that bratwurst I had wasn't the thing because the baby doesn't seem to like it. That is communication in a basic form. It happens without words. It happens without us having been introduced to one another. It happens without us having a formal understanding of who we are, but we are still communicating. And I spent many years of my life as a preschool teacher, and early childhood literacy was one of my passions. I have written children's books, so I really get the language of communicating to a child. I understand that there needs to be a cadence that they can get into, because sometimes when children are first reading, and very often, they're looking at pictures in a book, and they're liking the pictures, and they're identifying with the pictures, but they have no idea what the words on the page mean. And so you encourage them to look and you say, that is the beginning. And I would advise my parents, that is the beginning of literacy. I love when they're in the book nook that I've created for them because I know that their minds are starting to open up. And a very similar thing happens with us and our angelic realm. They start out with these very basic number sequences and we think that's a coincidence and we brush it off. But what's happening is they're starting to open up our minds to the idea that communication comes in more forms than a prayer or a word from our pastor, which it does. It comes in all these ways. It comes in more forms than a song or a quaint saying that is mentioned to you at the right moment in your life where you need it. Again, that is one of the many ways that we're communicated with. But the basic, the ABCs of angelic communication is this number pattern. And today, we're going to really unpack that number pattern and getting to what the numbers mean. And with anything in our life, there is a duality. So there is a positive vibration And there is maybe another vibration, whether you want to call it negative or lower or other, but it does have a duality. Just like with each of our signs, there are wonderful things about us that can be magnanimous and gracious, or there are things that we need to work on. There may be moods that we get into as we've been talking about the signs. So that's something I want you to understand, is that these numbers have a vibration. And just like with the kids who are beginning to open that book and start to see the pictures and identify with the themes before they can get the words, that is where we begin. And then they get into the words. And I remember reading to these children, and again, story time was my favorite. So one of the things that I did to draw them in, I taught 3-year-olds for many years. I love those guys. They're becoming little people. They have their own personalities. They can take care of themselves for the most part, but they are so in tune. They've just come in and they're so connected. And so I would sit before them, bringing my best, I hoped. And one day, one of the kids said to me, "Miss Monette, that is not very fun." And I thought, well, this is one of my favorite books. And of course it's fun. And let me show you how it's fun. But I wasn't doing a good job of conveying that. And I like this tie-in here because our angels sometimes realize when we're not getting it, when things are not very fun. So there is a cadence and a rhythm that I had to develop in order to draw the children into what I was reading. I had to make interesting faces, and I had to make funny voices, and I had to almost bebop along through the words of the book. And I know it may seem strange to draw the correlation, but our angels do similar things with us, especially when we're in our infancy of spiritual understanding and development. They bebop along with us, and they get into the stream of our life, and they get down at our level where we are, and they meet us there. And one of the ways is through this universal language of numbers. So one of the first numbers that people see when they're starting to wake up is 1111. Of course, that is all tied to the number 1. I remember years ago watching Ellen DeGeneres speak to the late, great Wayne Dyer on her show about how she was starting to see this number everywhere. And he said to her in his wise and calm demeanor, "Well, Ellen, you're waking up." And I remember looking at that and think, wow, the vulnerability of Ellen to be this huge celebrity who is admitting that she's seeing numbers, which in our society is not normally taken as a, regular thing. It makes me think of that movie Numbers that Jim Carrey was in, where he's having all these cascading numbers and it's leading to this great big mystery. And they did a really amazing job of conveying him dripping down the walls and all this binary code and everything. And I looked at that movie and thought, wow, I think Jim Carrey's crazy. Now, that's debatable. He's a genius in his way, but I definitely felt the energy of something's not right here. But when Ellen was talking about it, I thought, oh my God, I've been seeing that too. That means something. Now, I had started to see these numbers everywhere, but that 1111 is the first thing that lets you know you wake up, that you're waking up. And it's something that if you use Google, my friend, you can find out tons of information on that waking up number. That number, 1111, is like your angels tapping you on the shoulder and saying, yoo-hoo, guys, we're here. Now, I'll tell you, I had a reading maybe 15 years ago from a wonderful lady down in Vero Beach. And she said to me, your angels are screaming at you, trying to get your attention. And I thought, what are you talking about, lady? No one is screaming at me. No one is trying to get my attention. And in that reading, some interesting phenomena happened. She was talking to me about being a teacher at the time, and bells were ringing. She just had some chimes. It was a nice shop. It had cards and all kinds of incense and stuff in it. But there was just these little chimes, and they would ring on their own. And I thought, who's behind the wall pulling the chimes? This is like a parlor trick. I don't believe in these shenanigans, lady. She would say something else to me and something would move. And I thought, this is freaking me out. And she said, oh, that happens all the time. That's how they talk to you. Now, I don't want to confuse you guys. All of that does fall under the realm of them talking to you, of you being communicated with. But it doesn't mean that that will all happen to you at one time. My path obviously was a different path, so I got very intense information for a long time, and I'll share more about that with you guys as we get to know each other better. However, the bells that happen to ring just at the punctuation of the sentence, all of that stuff is all communication. I consider the angel numbers like the period on a sentence. When you're getting those numbers, stop and ask yourself, what am I thinking about right now? What am I worried about right now? What is not working for me? What is working for me? What do I feel like is moving in the right direction? And that is an indication that you're on the right path and understanding. So we're going to break this down and get into the numbers. 1, like we talked about, that 1111, the energy of number 1 resonates with the vibrations of new beginnings. Isn't it funny that that's the number they use? 1111, new beginnings, wake up, arise, arise, oh sleeper, because now it's time for you to tune into a different frequency. Frequency is an interesting thing because in the communication, frequencies are applicable. I'll tell you some of the ways, and you can also look this up, that people are communicated with is through what seems like a Morse code. And this has happened to me too, right before REM sleep, when you almost can't hold your eyelids open. I have heard this kind of beep, 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 like a tapping, like Morse code. And I used to think, what is going on? And then I would have the most incredible, enveloping, warm sleep where I knew that I was being downloaded information. Now, I didn't hear it like we're communicating right now. I didn't hear words. I just understood. And it was overwhelming sometimes. And I said for a while, I don't want this, because I was conflicted with my past religious upbringing. And I thought, what does this mean? Why do I have this overwhelming sense of getting information, but I don't understand it? And then I figured out that light workers all over the world have this happen to them too. I wasn't alone. Again, that moment that Ellen shared was kind of like a kinship. I thought, this happens to us all. Now, the reason I mention the frequencies before I get back into 1 is to say this. That can be overwhelming. Again, my path is different. So the way that my information was conveyed to me and is conveyed to me is different than anybody. We all get our information differently. This number thing is like the best way to kind of dip your toe in the water. I think the angels are very gracious with this because it's not alarming. You don't feel like, whoa, who's taking over my life? Where is this coming from? Am I going crazy? You just think, I keep seeing numbers. It's kind of weird, but it's not throwing me off my game. So let's get back into 1 and why they start there. Because it's about independence. It's about tapping into your uniqueness. It's about striving forward and progress and ambition and your will and positivity and positiveness. It's about the energy of pioneering, guys. That's why they start with it, because they're saying we're getting ready to go into a new direction. We're getting ready to do something different with you. You've lived in this world and walked in this world and not had your eyes open in this world. And now it's time to wake up. That's what happens with 1. It's raw energy. It's force and activity and self-leadership and assertiveness and self-reliance and strength and creating your own reality. I love that part, because when you are seeing 1 or 111 or 1111 in any sequence on a repeating basis in your life, meaning daily almost, you can look up and you're going to look up at 1111, or your bill or your gas is going to be 111, or, something like that. That is how it happens. On the way driving in here today, so interesting, I was going over the show in my head, as I always do, getting ready to be here and share my energy with you guys. And in front of me, I just heard look up, okay? And I'm clairaudient, so I do hear, okay? So I heard look up, and I looked up, and there was a license plate in front of me that was 999. Now, if I can post it without, revealing the identity of the driver, I will see if I can do that so you guys can see. And then I